Joy is something that you can be deeply rooted in, that even in pain and sorrow that you can experience joy. Joy and pain can happen in the exact same space. That's how it works, is that joy isn't an emotion, joy is a state.
Hello, and welcome back to Seek the Joy podcast. Happy Seek the Joy Tuesday. On the podcast this week is Amber Runyon, the founder and CEO of 11th Candle Co and Legacy. And collectively, these two organizations have come together as a social enterprise working globally to redeem, restore, empower, and equip those vulnerable to human trafficking, abuse, exploitation, and addiction. And what is so cool and empowering and inspiring and impactful about what Amber has created is that when you purchase a candle, when you purchase a product from 11th Candle Co., a once trafficked woman in Columbus, Ohio, is employed while a village in Ethiopia is supported, and orphan children there are welcomed into homes because of those who purchase their products. I was really so excited to have this conversation with Amber, and on today's episode, we chat all about the incredible life-changing experience that led her to starting Legacy and 11th Candle Co. We talk about the impact she and her team are having and how she's really been able to bring light into darkness to bring about sustainable change. We also chat about why it's so important to allow ourselves to dream and to dream big, shifting our self-talk and changing the narrative within ourselves. We also talk about letting go of fear and doubt, why it's so important to celebrate failure, Amber's affirmation and gratitude practice, joy as a state of being, and so much more. Before we dive into this week's new episode, I have to share the iTunes review of the week, and it comes from Perrin Skinner, and it says, "Heart-opening and fresh air for the soul. Sydney has created exactly what I've been looking for in a podcast. I've thoroughly enjoyed every episode." Perrin, thank you so much for taking some time to rate and review Seek the Joy podcast on Apple iTunes. You've already emailed me, so I've had a chance to thank you, but I can't tell you just how much it means to me. If you've been enjoying this podcast, if you want to show some support for this podcast, I would be so grateful. Just make sure to send a screenshot of your review to Sydney at seekthejoypodcast.com. And as a way to say thank you, I will send you my guide for infusing more joy into your life, as well as some Seek the Joy podcast stickers. All right, guys, that's it. As always, to learn more about this week's episode, head on over to the show notes section of our website, seekthejoypodcast.com/show-notes, and everything is right there, including the 25% off coupon code that Amber is offering Seek the Joy podcast listeners. All you have to do is enter the code SEEK, S-E-E-K, at checkout to get that 25% off, and I just can't wait for you guys to check these out. Amber's story and what she witnessed in Ethiopia and the ways in which she's been able to have an impact and create change will stop you dead in your tracks and remind you to believe in the power of kindness, humanity, and that there's really never one step too small to make an impact. So, without further ado, here is my conversation with Amber.
Thanks for having me. I'm Amber. I'm the founder and chief candle maker at 11th Candle Company. And we employ women that have been victims of human trafficking, exploitation, addiction, or abuse through making candles.
So where did everything begin?
Yeah, so it's not the conventional way, that's for sure. I was a nurse and I traveled overseas and did a bunch of international medical work. And one of those trips landed me in Ethiopia, where I fell in love with a little girl named Mulu. And I just kept going over to see her. I would work to travel. And I saw all these needs in her community. And one day I watched two little girls being trafficked. They were blindfolded and being led through the market. And I asked my translator, what's happening? And he said, oh, they're being sold. And I said, what do you mean they're being sold? And he said, they're being sold for sex. They're blindfolded so they can't figure out where they are. And I'm like, I'm sorry, what? And so I came back home, and, it obviously really kind of shook me. And I came back home and started doing some research here and recognized that that if Mulu were to come to Columbus with me, that she had the same likelihood of being trafficked in Columbus as she did in Ethiopia. And I decided I didn't want to live in a world where little girls and little boys could be bought and sold. And so then kind of looking at, if we're to solve this problem, how do we go about doing this? How do we go from rape to redeemed? And where do we fall short? And so I kept looking at things from a local level to a state level to a national level. Where do we keep falling short? Where do we keep falling short? And what I found was that they really lack up that purpose piece. And so people really need three things to thrive: safe place, safe people, and purpose. And we, as a society, so often forget that purpose piece. And so that's when I decided that I would start a company that employed women.
Yeah. I mean, I don't
That's
even
the
know.
Short version.
Yeah, I don't even know where to begin. I mean, to have that experience, to be there and witness two little girls being trafficked, I don't know how you walk away without having that moment really stay with you and without having it have a really strong impact in changing, the entire course of your life.
Yeah. I mean, it was just this realization that this actually really does happen in our world. If we just begin to look at it, you would see it happening.
Right.
You're in California and Los Angeles. I don't know where they rank, but I'm confident that they're probably in the top 10.
Wow.
Just by capita, right? Like just by or there. And so that's the thing that's fascinating about human trafficking, is that it's done in the darkness, and it's so hidden, and we don't really know what we're looking for. And so therefore we don't think that it actually happens in our community.
Yeah. So once you start opening your eyes to what's happening, once you become aware and start realizing that this is happening, both internationally and in my backyard, I can imagine it probably was like a kick in the pants, right? To really be part of the solution.
Yeah, and I think that's what we as a society miss, is that we don't get involved in things until they affect us. And so what I'm hoping that we can begin to do as a society and as a whole is to begin to fight issues before they affect us, right?
Yeah.
I want to fight human trafficking before I have kids and I have to worry about them.
Right.
We don't get involved into something until it smacks us in the face. But what if we begin to be proactive so that we didn't have to worry about if our nieces or our nephews or our kids or grandkids are going to be trafficked, that's something that we're aware of and that we fight before it becomes a problem for us.
That's a really important point that you just raised. And I really admire what you've done and how you've really taken your passion and determination and put it, into practice. And so from your experiences from Ethiopia, I know that Legacy was born, and that's the nonprofit arm of what you do. And so when you started, did you start with the intention of it being both local and international? We did. So we started a nonprofit and a for-profit, a local and a foreign. It's all at the same time. So the whole idea, it was all created to work with each other. So I believe that the way that we really fix social issues is nonprofit, for-profit, and government. That's the way that we between those three things. So government has to pass the laws to make the things, work for the people that we're trying to work for. The for-profit, it helps generate money to create the change and provides the place for these people to work. And then the nonprofit provides all the additional resources that these people need. So they don't just need a job. They need trauma-informed care. They need counseling. They need coaching and those sort of things. And between those three things working together, that's how we can create a true sustainable change. Yeah. I mean, you're so spot on. You really have to look at all angles in order to bring about that sustainable change and growth. And so what has been the most impactful part about being part of all of this and using the resources that you're building to really go back into these communities and really make a change?
Yeah, I think one of the cooler things that we've been able to do is to watch that change happen both here and over there. And so to be able to show the women in Columbus that we're working for more than just us. We say it every morning when we get together and have our team meetings, that we're not working for the people that are in our program. We're working for the woman who's still out on the street. We're working for the kid that is still hungry. And so kind of give that perspective of the people that are in our program, either the ones that are in our program over in Ethiopia or the people that are in our program here in the States, that they're the lucky ones, right? Mm-hmm. And so that we have to remember that we're working for the ones that haven't made it into our program.
Yeah, what you just said, that you're working for the ones that haven't made it in your program yet, is a perspective that I haven't heard, too many people speak on. And so how do you do that through 11th Candle Co? I know that you employ women in the Columbus area.
Yeah. So the for-profit the nonprofit provides the coaching, the counseling, and the employment opportunity to the women. And then the for-profit 11th Candle Company provides the actual place of employment, and provides the time and the space for that coaching and that counseling. And so it's pretty simple. If you buy a candle, you employ a woman. And if we don't sell candles, people aren't employed. Mm-hmm. The more people that we can employ, the more lives that we're changing. And so it's really that simple. You buy a candle, you employ a woman.
Wow. So what has it been like for you to work side by side with these women, and in that moment that you're having this kind of impact on their lives?
Yeah, I mean, I think that for me, it gives me like a real perspective into my own life, right? So sometimes running this nonprofit and for-profit in this all of these different things pulling at you, you can become overwhelmed and overworked. And so it's really gives me this perspective of like, these people are getting up every day and they're the ones that are really actually doing the hard work. They're choosing not to be addicted to drugs and to come to work. They're choosing not to be addicted to alcohol and come to work. And they're choosing not to live the life that they lived. Mm-hmm. And so for me, like when things become hard, I recognize that like, we can choose our hard, right? So is it hard to be an addict? Yes. Is it hard to get up and come to work every day? Yes. But you have to choose your hard. And so I think that just helps me put into perspective that like, yes, life is hard, but like we can do hard things.
Yeah, that is really true. Where did you get that perspective from? Is it from moments in your own life or through doing the work that you do?
I think it was kind of a combination. So I grew up as a foster kid, and so I kind of have this unique perspective on life anyways. My home life prior to foster care wasn't great. Foster care wasn't great. I put myself through nursing school and kind of always had a bit of a struggle. And now that I'm in a place in my life where I've built something and I'm financially secure and I have all of my ducks in a row, and I've done really hard counseling and worked on myself, it kind of puts it into perspective that anybody can do this sort of work. They just need the resources. I was fortunate enough to be able to afford really, really good counseling. And so when I saw how that drastically changed my life, it became a non-negotiable that we were going to provide this for our women because I was privileged enough to be able to afford it. And so how do we go about providing this for people so that everybody has this opportunity not to walk around with all this trauma?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. So many of us are really privileged in the sense that we can get help and we do have access to resources and we do have the ability to work on ourselves, but there are so many of us who don't have those resources. And so if we can make them more accessible and widespread, and if we can remove the stigma associated with it too, I'm really confident that there could be greater change, but it's really about making those resources available to everyone.
Right. It is about teaching people those resources, and getting people to understand that these are resources that they need to use.
Yeah.
Right. So everybody's like, oh, I don't need counseling. Every single person needs counseling. Every single person can benefit and become a better person from counseling. Now, does every single person need counseling to the level that the women that we employ? No, but everybody can become better.
Yeah. And it really does start, with that choice to grow. And once we make that choice, the possibilities are really endless. And I think you're right. Everyone could benefit from some form of counseling or introspective work that helps to propel, that growth too. So where did your passion for all of this come from, for helping women and children and really being of service in this way?
I think it really is just kind of like born into me, and that injustices just really irritate the crap out of me.
Yeah.
Like something's not fair or something's not balanced or something's unjust, it absolutely drives me bananas. And so I think that's just kind of naturally how I'm wired. But I think more than that is that there's this notion, right? Like it's the year of woman, it's the year of this. Women in general have been oppressed over the course of the entire history. Mm-hmm. And so I think that it's this idea of this oppressed people that right, I say this quote often, and it's that I believe that if we can teach little girls a dream, that they'll be the force that changes this world. But I believe more than that if we can teach broken women to dream like little girls again, it'll be a force that this world is yet to see. Mm-hmm. We've never taught them to dream. We've taught them not to be addicted. We've taught them not to prostitute. We've taught them not to do this, but we've never looked at them and said, dream. But more than that, the people in the audience that I speak to, when I say that, they think I'm referring to the woman in our shop. But the truth is I'm referring to every woman. Mm-hmm. Every woman somewhere along the way has become broken and has lost that ability or that that want to be free. And here's the thing about free people are dangerous, right? Because they laugh more and they believe more and they dream more. And so when people are free, things change, right?
Mm-hmm. That's so interesting. Why do you think women have really forgotten how to dream and how to dream big?
Because our society tells us that we can't, right? Our society tells us that we're pretty first, right?
Yeah.
And that we're strong second, and that we should be quiet, and that we should smile. Think about how many times as a woman you've been told to smile, right? What's wrong? What's wrong? Smile. No, like, you don't get to dictate what I do with my body. And so I think overall that's just how our society has been. And now I'm not like a raging feminist by any means, but I believe that women have been oppressed. And the way to fix that is not to oppress men. That's not how you fix oppression. Oppression of another kind is not the fix to oppression. It's equality. And so I think the way that we do that is that we begin with our little girls and we teach them how to dream. But more than that, we begin to look at broken women and show them that they can dream again. So we look at women who have their identity wrapped up in all of these other things and get them back to who they are. So you're not a mom, you're not a wife, you're like, who are you? And really begin to dig into that piece of them. And I think that men feel like they're in this really weird space of they can't say anything or they can't do anything, or it's the year of woman or it's the year of that. That you will never see a more empowered woman than to have a man silently behind her, encouraging and pushing her. That is where you will find some of your strongest women, is a man who stands behind her saying, I believe in you. Not a man that feels like he needs to walk in front of her or beside her, but somebody that's behind her, giving her that strong place to land. You'll find a woman who operates from a completely different place. So we need our men to stand up. We need our men to say, I support my daughter full-heartedly no matter what she wants to go into. And we need our men to say, I support the women in our lives, whether it's a sister or a coworker. We need men to allow women to live in that space, but that doesn't oppress the man. There's nothing stronger than a man who will silently stand behind and encourage.
Yeah, that's so true. It's really about empowering each other and allowing those voices to rise to the surface, without silencing another voice. And just like you said, there's really strength within that. And I just really hope that we continue to move, in that direction.
Yeah. And I think that the way that we do that is that we begin to have conversations like this with both men and women.
Yeah.
Right. And that we bring different people in, different perspectives in, so that we can together as a community, as a world, begin to become better, instead of just this one group being better and this group still being oppressed. That's how I think that's how we fix oppression.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think it goes back to what you were saying earlier, just about how someone identifies themselves or chooses to see themselves in the world. And so within that, how have you been able to let go maybe of defining yourself in a certain way? So, I'm sure it could be easy to just define yourself as a nurse or a business owner or a humanitarian. And so how have you been able to let go of doing that and maybe instead integrate or incorporate all of those different identities without, sort of putting yourself in a box?
Yeah, I mean, I think it really just comes down to, I just don't think I'm a big deal, right? And so I think that people either want to be a big deal or they think of themselves as a big deal. And so then they get wrapped up in that. And the moment that you start allowing your ego to get into that is when you just get completely jacked up. That's how you jack up your relationships. That's how you jack up your work. And so for me, I think that I don't allow that sort of stuff to go to my head, and that I'm rooted in that, I am just Amber, right? And so now, do I always do well at that? No. And when I'm not doing well at that, it's like a neon sign, hey, you got to check yourself. And so I think that's kind of how I do it, is that I just don't, right? I've been written up in magazines and newspapers and on the news and met with senators and done all these really cool things, and get to travel to Africa and get to the opportunity and the privilege to run this company. But if I allow that to start going to my head, I guarantee you I would lose everything. And so I think it's this balance between fear that I know how this will turn out for me, and this realization that I'm just not a big deal.
Yeah.
And I don't want to be a big deal.
Yeah. So is it helpful for you to return to your why in moments like that when you really need to check yourself in that way?
Yeah, for certain, because it's not about me. And people will say that all the time. Oh, like your company is you. No, it's not really. Like, and so I return to my why, which is Mulu, and that there are hundreds of thousands of Mulus who just need somebody to fight for them. And so really at the end of the day, it's not about me. The same way that we check everybody in our home office staff and in our program, like you're not making this candle for you.
Yeah.
You're not selling this candle for you. You're not selling actually for anybody in our program. These people are already benefiting from it. We're selling it for the people who still need help. And so for me, I think it's easy to check myself in that this isn't about me.
Yeah, I found that, that too, that the moment you return to your why, everything changes, because otherwise I think it's often really easy to lose sight of your core mission and values and why you started in the first place, doing the work that you're doing.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you have to watch that, right? Because that's an easy slippery slope to try to balance that out. I'm very fortunate in that I have to look these women in the eyes every day. And so it's not as hard to slip down that slope because I'm staring at them every day. So
yeah.
It's easy to pick program over profit when you're literally standing beside them every day.
Yeah, absolutely. And what a gift, right? To be able to see that impact day in and day out. And we touched on this a little bit earlier, just about fear and doubt, but how have you been able to step outside of that fear and that doubt for yourself that I think can really creep up on us when we are getting ready to embark on anything that is greater than us and that we know is going to have, a big impact or, change in our communities?
Yeah, I guess I think that it's just this weird natural kind of thing where I think a lot of people are like, what if I can't do this? And I guess for me, like my go-to is like, what if I can do this? And so I don't know what it is or how I do it or like what the magic equation is to that. But for me, it's kind of like if I do this and I fail, like big deal.
Right.
Like I don't know. I don't know how I do it. I don't know that other than it's just some, God gifted, mercy upon me so that I will do the stuff that I'm supposed to do. But I think that for me, it's like, well, what if I can make this happen? Not what if it doesn't happen. And so I guess I kind of lean a little bit more towards like, well, let's try it. And if it doesn't work, then we just keep trying.
Yeah.
Right. I think that's why so many businesses fail is because they try something and it fails and they try something and it fails and they try something and it fails. But for me, it's like that failure is just the next thing that shows me that that's not the way I'm supposed to do it. So then you try again. And so I think that people just get really wrapped up in that. And it's not that I'm smarter than everybody else. I just stay with my problems longer. I'm not wiser than any other business person. I just stick with it. And I think that that's just kind of naturally how I was made, and that like I just refuse to give up.
Yeah, too many of us give up way too soon, and that persistence and that resilience really goes a long way. And I think a lot of it is realizing for ourselves in those moments that what you want to do is important and needed and necessary, but the way to get there may not be that road that you initially were walking down. So it's about having the ability to adjust and constantly readjust and fine tune. And I can imagine that you're still really fine tuning your approach and your process, right, as time goes on.
Yeah, we're 2.5, almost 3, and we've experienced exponential growth as a company from the very beginning, and it's the same thing. So we're shifting to more of a retail sort of company versus an online. We'll still do online, but we're opening up retail shops. And so how do you do that? And what does your retail experience look like? And what scents do you have? And what products do you roll out next? And it's ever evolving. And so I think the moment that you stop evolving is when things don't work. Like look at Toys R Us, right?
Yeah,
biggest toy distributor. And then when everything went online, they did not hit that niche, and now they're gone. And so I think that in business, you have to be ever evolving.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's so true, both in business and in life.
For
and
certain.
So how have you been able to continue to evolve as Amber?
Yeah. So one thing that I advocate strongly for any leader, this is a non-negotiable, but really anybody in life is counseling. And I did a good, 9 months worth of really, really, really intense counseling called EMDR. And it's eye movement, reprocessing desensitization. And so what that does is it kind of works with how your brain works and stores the traumas in your life, and the way that you view your life is through that trauma. And so I did a ton of work over a course of 9 months, and I got into yoga where I integrated the healing into my body, and I still do that stuff, and I still work on that. And so I think if you see a good, strong company, the chances are you have a good, strong, healthy leader. If you see a company that's really struggling, that shows you that your leader is really struggling. And so the way that you balance those out, because if I'm not doing well, my company's not doing well, and if my company's not doing well, then I'm not doing well. And so you have to treat them as two different individuals, right? So I have to treat my company as a person. And what does that person need? Does it need more money? Does it need health? Does it need to be fed better? Like, what does it need? And then also treating yourself that way, because the truth is that, we can claim to work 90, 100-hour weeks, but that's not healthy. And what is healthy is taking breaks and going on trips and figuring out what works best for you.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. We have to take the time to take stock of what we need and what our businesses need. And I think the time is really here to let go of this idea that to be successful means you push. And I love what you shared about that 9-month period in your life of being in counseling and taking time to be introspective and heal. And so today, how do you maintain balance for yourself and take time to make sure you go on trips and not, push yourself to work 90 hours a week and be, totally exhausted?
Yeah, I mean, I still do all of those things. I still do yoga and counseling, but I think it's surrounding yourself with people who will hold you accountable. I think it's knowing that as a leader that your people are watching you. So my team is watching me, right? From our home office staff to the women in our program to the people who buy, they're watching and saying, how am I really doing what I'm saying I'm doing? But I think more than that, it's an actual practice. I mean, there are some days that I don't want to go to yoga, but I know that if I don't go to yoga, that is a slippery slope, and 3 months will go by and I will not have gone to yoga.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I know that I don't always want to dig into the deepest parts of myself, but I know that if I stop doing that, then 3 months will go by and I'll be in this really bad place. And so it's this and creating morning routines and nighttime routines. And I still am trying to figure out what is my best morning routine, what is my best nighttime routine, and then changing how you talk to yourself, right? Changing how you view your successes and failures. I always say, like, may my successes never outweigh my failures. Like, I would prefer to fail more than I succeed, because if I begin to succeed more than I fail, it will not be good. And so I think that it's kind of keeping those things in perspective, but really just looking at that you are your number one priority. We have somehow become this generation where we're taking care of yourself is considered selfish. But self-care, which is not a bubble bath and not a manicure, self-care is digging in and doing your budget. Self-care is digging in and getting your house under control. Self-care is weeding out bad relationships and getting all that toxicity out of your life and letting go of things. That's self-care. Now, sometimes is it a bubble bath and manicure? Absolutely. But that is not real self-care. And self-care is getting into counseling and doing yoga or a regular exercise or meeting with friends. And so I think that you actually have to continue to, it's a lifelong thing. Now, does that mean that you have to dig into your uttermost deep parts forever? No, I did it for 9 really hard months, twice a week. I went to counseling twice a week for a good portion of my counseling. And I'm still doing all those same things, and we'll get back into counseling again and kind of go back through that phase again. It won't be near as hard as it was my first time around, but you have to maintain that.
Yeah, I love what you just shared about what self-care is, and I couldn't agree more, because it's so much deeper than what social media has portrayed it to be. And sometimes, just like you said, the best form of self-care is getting yourself organized and removing yourself from toxic relationships and checking in with yourself daily. It goes so much deeper.
I mean, I'm living proof of it. So I feel like if you're gonna talk the talk, you should probably walk the walk, you know?
Totally. And so you also mentioned how it's been important for you to shift how you speak to yourself. And what has that experience and journey been like for you, shifting your self-talk and shifting that level of compassion and kindness towards yourself and showing yourself more self-love in that way?
Yeah, so I think that it's really interesting in that I think like I would say or think something about myself, and then somebody would say like the polar opposite of it. And I just started beginning to like listen to like what I was saying to myself, and then I started writing it down. Like I literally, and I mean, we're talking like 3 notepads full of like 3 note pages full of like things that I say to myself. Like I just took like an inventory of what do I say to myself on a daily basis for like a week, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I read them, and I'm like, well, no wonder I feel like crap, because listen to how I'm talking to myself.
Totally.
And then I looked at that and I was like, would I speak to my friend like that? I would not have any friends. Right?
Yeah.
I just wouldn't have any friends. And so why is it that I value somebody so much more than I value myself? Now, have I nailed this? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. But I think it's just becoming conscious of how you speak to yourself in doing that. So just write down, even for a day. If you did it for a day and you captured and wrote down every negative thought that you have about yourself, it will absolutely rock your core. And so I think it's just becoming aware of that and catching yourself quicker, right? Because we're still going to do it, but it's catching yourself quicker and then replacing that with the truth, right? Having a daily affirmation and just really beginning to do that. And then catching your friends and holding them accountable. So when a friend says something negative about themselves, remind them that that's not who they are.
Yeah. Oh, I love this. I love this. Okay. So what is your daily affirmation right now?
Hold on. I can tell you, I can look at my little journal and tell you what I made today. Oh, it's simple. I'm enough. So 3 things that I'm grateful for, and then 3 things that will make today great, and then a daily affirmation. And then in the evening, it was 3 things that made today awesome, 3 things that could have made today better, and then a nighttime affirmation. And so do I do that every day? No, I'm really trying to get better at that. But it's kind of just reminding yourself that those things are true and that it's okay to believe that about yourself. It's okay to believe that I'm a good person. Right. But when you say that about yourself, it feels wrong. Like it feels like you shouldn't be able to feel that way about yourself.
Which is so crazy. It is so crazy that we think that way.
Because evidently we have friends and spouses and all those different things. They think we're okay.
Right. I mean, they think we're awesome, but we don't think that way about ourselves.
Right. And so I think that's just a big thing that we have to begin to become okay with. And giving ourselves grace and space and not shaming ourselves. Like, I'm going to make some bad decisions. There's no doubt, because I make a gajillion decisions. So eventually one of them is going to be bad, right? Either personally or professionally, and not beating yourself up over it. Well, I started this new routine and I've not been able to keep it. Instead of shaming myself and making myself feel like crap about not doing it, starting all over again, reminding myself that I'm worthy of this routine and getting into that routine.
I love this because I've fallen into this trap too, right? And I know so many people have also, where it's like, because I wasn't able to do it, I tell myself I'm a failure, or I suck at this, or I'll never be able to do it. Or it's like, well, there you go again. You know, you have no follow through. And so it's about shifting that narrative and showing yourself grace and compassion and kindness in that moment and saying, hey, it's okay. We'll start again tomorrow. I mean, I think shifting this perspective really applies to everything. And it's not just about focusing on that in those moments of a morning practice or an evening practice. I mean, it's really widespread and it applies to everything that you do in your life.
That's it. It's a practice. It's a daily practice.
Yeah.
Right? And if you think that you're not going to be able, that you like, something that I just probably in the last year have learned is that, like, I think I'm going to do it for 5 days and I'm good. No, like, it's literally a daily thing. It is a moment by moment thing. And the thing about failures, and something that we do as a company, and I remember when this happened, like yesterday. I mean, it was one of those like defining moments where you're like, oh, okay. I went into this, we were brand new. I mean, we maybe 6 months old as a company, maybe 9 months old. And I went into the shop early one morning, and there was a whole tray of candles, and I began to pull them out and smell them because we sell scented candles. And they were not scented. And I remember thinking, oh, okay, how do you handle that? How do I handle this? Like, how do I do this from a leadership perspective? How do I handle this? Because this is not correct, but how do I handle this?
Right.
and this is before we started partnering with like trauma-informed care, where I could have called them and said, hey, how do we do this?
Right.
And so I remember thinking, okay, this is like where the rubber meets the road. Like, what are you going to do? And I remember thinking, we're going to celebrate this. We are going to celebrate this failure. And so I went down to the local baker and I got a dozen donuts and I brought them and I set them on the table and everybody got there and you know, I set everybody down and I said, okay, here's the deal. We really messed up. Here's a whole tray of candles. You know, it's hundreds of dollars for the product that we're going to have to throw away. We really failed. But we're going to celebrate this failure because the truth is that yesterday you chose sobriety over addiction. And that is a success. The truth is that you got up out of bed and you came to work, and that is a success. And so, yes, we failed at this and this was not good, but we are going to celebrate this failure because the truth is trying is success enough. And I remember like 2 weeks later, we were standing in the shop and we have these little heat guns that check the temperature of the wax, you know, for when we fragrance it and whatnot. And one of the women dropped the heat gun down inside of the hot pot of wax and she pulls it out. I remember like wax like went up into the air. She pulls it up out of the pot of wax and she goes, "We get donuts." And so instead of, right?
That's amazing.
I'm like, we're going to have diabetes. And so instead of her feeling the shame and wrapping it up in a paper towel and hiding it in the trash and then lying about where it was, she felt liberated enough to celebrate that failure in that moment. Now, did she mean to do it? Absolutely not. But she felt the freedom to be able to celebrate the fact that she was trying to figure out what the temperature was, made a mistake, and was able to celebrate through that. So we went and got donuts. And we celebrated that failure. And so I think people need to do that in their own personal life. Like when you fail, go get yourself a donut. And if you don't do carbs, then go get yourself a carrot stick, whatever it is that makes you happy.
But just
right?
celebrate it, right? And celebrate the fact that you tried.
Right.
And I love what you said, that trying is success, because the fact that you put one foot in front of the other, you woke up today, you made choices to better your life. That in itself is success, regardless of the outcome. And I think that's so powerful.
Right. And so I think that that's how we get to this place of beginning to self-love, is that if you messed up, if you didn't do your nighttime routine for a week, you know what? Tomorrow's a new day and mercies are new the next day. Right.
Could not agree more.
You can change that narrative inside of your head the moment that you catch it.
Yeah.
So the moment that you catch that you're doing this to yourself, you can change the narrative right there in that exact moment. And guess what? In 20 minutes, you're going to have to change that narrative again. And in 30 minutes, you're going to have to change that narrative again. But the point is that you continue to change that narrative.
Yeah. And it's about having that awareness, you know, to be able to do so. So I want to talk to you a little bit about joy in your life, because I can imagine that this work brings you so much joy, but I know that there's a lot of emotion and a real seriousness here too, you know, because it is about giving back and creating change and being part of these women's lives, either directly or indirectly. And so what role does joy really play in your life? And what does joy even really feel like for you?
So interesting. That was my word of the year 2 years ago. Like how that word kind of came about to be my word of the year was that I make myself choose joy. Right. So it's not just like joy, right? Because here's the deal. Happiness and joy and all of these sort of emotions, right?
Yeah.
Are liars, right? Because I could be experiencing happiness and I could be experiencing, you know, all of these different things. And then somebody could call me and tell me that my dog was dead and that emotion would be gone.
Right.
Right. And so it's a fleeting sort of thing. Whereas joy is something that you can be deeply rooted in, that even in pain and sorrow that you can experience joy. Joy and pain can happen in the exact same space. Right. That's how it works, is that joy isn't an emotion. Joy is a state. And so joy and grief can happen in the same period. Joy and pain can happen in the same period. They're not, you know, you can't, it's not like you can just have one or the other. They happen at the same time. And so I think that you have to get to the place where you choose to be joyful, that it is an active choice, just like you choose your heart. And so I think that you have to get to this place where you recognize that joy is an actual choice, and that in spite of the things that are going on around you, in spite of how you may feel, in spite of like what is going on around you, that you can choose those things, and that you can can find peace. You can find peace in knowing that pain and joy can live in the same space.
Wow.
That you can have pain from a bruised issue, but you can also seek and find joy in that. You can be going through a rough time and feel that bruise from life, but you can experience the joy that's right in front of you. Mm-hmm. And so find peace in that you can have and seek and choose joy in spite of pain, in spite of hard, that they operate in the same space.
Right. So it doesn't have to be mutually exclusive, that you can still choose joy, right, in any given moment, despite difficulty or hardship. And I think that's such an important message. And so how have you been able to choose joy in those moments?
I think it's just recognizing that my life could have turned out and looked a lot different than it does. And really it's practicing gratitude, which I think a lot of people get like, that's so woo-woo. And I'm not a woo-woo person at all, but really practicing gratitude and being thankful for the really small things. So I'm thankful that I have a car. I'm thankful that I have a job. I'm thankful that I have great friends. I'm thankful for the experiences that I've experienced. So that to put into perspective that yes, I'm having a bad day. Yes, this is going wrong. Yes, this is happening. But in the grand scheme of things, I'm so incredibly lucky. I have so many reasons to have joy. And so I think that's how I've been able to put it in perspective. I don't always get this right either. I don't want to sound like Saint Amber that has this perfectly figured out. I don't.
But we're all human, right? And so, we all make mistakes, and there's this constant ebb and flow within any journey. And I know for me, on some days it's easier than others to choose joy too. And so if there's anyone that's listening to this podcast who is no doubt inspired by you and the incredible perspective that you have and the work that you've done and the impact that you're having, what would be your biggest piece of advice for someone who wants to step outside of themselves and do something very similar?
You need to be so deeply rooted into who you are and why you're doing it, that when the hard days come, because they will come and they will stay and they will be so incredibly painful, that you are so deeply rooted into who you are and why you're doing it, that there's nothing that will move you. And so you need to get to that place before you start it, because you could be like me and not be in that place before you start it. And then all of those things happen. And then you have to go through this horribly painful journey. And maybe that's the journey that you're going to have to choose either way. Mm-hmm. But I always strongly suggest to people that you deeply, deeply, deeply know who you are, know your strengths, know your weaknesses, know your values, what you value. And then have your why be so buried deep inside of you that nothing and no one can convince you that there's anything else that you should be doing.
I mean, mic drop on that one, Amber. I mean, that's beautiful. And I could not say that any better if I tried, being deeply rooted in who you are and your values. It makes the journey, I think, a little clearer and easier to see where you're going and who you want to be and what you want to do. And just like you said, part of that journey sometimes is learning who you are and learning how to become more deeply rooted in who you are as time goes on. And so we've spent a lot of time reflecting, but what would you say is your biggest dream?
My biggest dream personally would be to get my business to a place of good, stable, that's growing and helping our community, and a place that I can step back away from enough to be able to grow a family. My big professional dream is that every community would be able to have an 11th Candle Co, because I believe every community needs a place where people can have a safe place, safe people, and purpose. And so that would be my dream, is that every community could have an 11th Candle company to be able to provide that to people.
Yeah, and it's going to happen. It's just a matter of time. Amber, I have loved having this conversation with you. Where can everyone find more information on Legacy and 11th Candle Co. and start purchasing some candles and get more involved?
Yeah, for sure. So 11thcandleco.com, the kind of get you everything that you need to know. The right side of the page is kind of all about who we are and what we value and the story of Legacy and what Legacy is. And then the left side is where you can just purchase candles. And then any social media is just at 11th Candle Co. And so follow along there for all the new and fun things that we're doing. And then we'll give your listeners a promo code. I'll have Samantha send that over to you so that you can share that with your listeners. 25% off of their order.
Amazing. That sounds great. Okay, perfect. So I'll include all of the information along with the promo code in the show notes for today's episode. And Amber, thank you so much. This was such an incredible conversation. I learned so much, and just thank you for sharing, honestly, just so many incredible moments and lessons and reflections from your life.
Yeah, thanks so much.